two top ministers in the Boris Johnson cabinet have resigned within a span of 10 minutes. Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid have resigned from the Boris government. In his resignation letter, Sunak said that even though this may be his last ministerial job, but the public rightly expects the government to be conducted properly, competently and seriously. He added that he believed that these standards were worth fighting for, and that is why he was resigning. Radhika Iyer is now joining us live from the UK. Radhika, first of all, help us understand why have these two resignations come in one after the other?
Well, it's a hard question to answer, but it's certainly one that has astounded most experts here, including political experts. Just 30 days ago, we saw Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, going through a no-confidence vote in the Parliament, in the British Parliament. Over 41% of MPs and Tory Conservative Party members and leaders had voted against Boris Johnson, who decided then to continue as the Prime Minister of this nation, even after such stiff opposition. However, now this resignation by Rishi Sunak, the one which is just after the Boris Johnson or the Prime Minister's chair in a government, Rishi Sunak, who is the son-in-law of Narayan Murthy, the chairman of Infosys, as well as Sajid Javid, the Secretary for Health, both have resigned within a span of 10 minutes. And the letters that they have sent in as resignation letters are very, very clear that they were unhappy with the decisions being made by Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Rishi Sunak actually goes out to say that in these difficult times where the economy and some difficult decisions have to be taken, it is very important for both the Prime Minister and myself to be on the same page. He has indicated that in the past, although he was publicly loyal to Boris Johnson, his leader, Rishi Sunak had internally disagreed with some of the decisions that were made by this Conservative government, especially during the pandemic between years 2020 and 2021. Just recently, about 2 days ago, Rishi Sunak had a press meet, in fact, with the Indian press meet, the Indian Journalists Association, where he was indicating that a lot of India and UK-related ties and bilateral trade is something that he is very keenly watching, as well as the foreign trade agreement or the free trade agreement that is likely to come through in October 2022. Many journalists even asked him questions about whether he is aspiring to be the Prime Minister of this nation and when there will be such a change, when there will be an Asian man leading this nation, the United Kingdom, as the Prime Minister, to which he indicated, we never know and this is only the beginning. But today in his letter, he indicates that this possibly is his last ministerial position or a job that he's holding. So clearly this is seen as a huge bolt to Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, not just to his government, but also to him and his reputation, given 41% had rejected him as Prime Minister. Now, two of his key ministers, both Rishi Sunak as well as Sajid Javid, have rejected him and have tendered their resignation. So this clearly will have a huge impact on the government itself, and it can potentially raise some questions on the continuity and the longevity of this government, or as Boris Johnson as Prime Minister.
Radhika, stay on with us. Shruti Kapila, a professor in the Faculty of History at the University of Cambridge, is also joining us here on the show. I want to ask you, Shruti, about the fact that Boris Johnson has been on a sticky wicket for some time now. In fact, when he traveled to India, a journalist even asked him a question whether he is going to be Prime Minister till Diwali, because he said that he hopes India and UK can sign a trade deal by Diwali. He just gave a single word answer saying that yes, he expects himself to be there. But clearly the situation is looking untenable for him now, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, I think this has been a pretty shaky grounds for Boris Johnson since Partygate started actually last Christmas. And he's just been, moving on and actually damaging his support. He lost, he barely won the no confidence motion. And the idea was to kind of have it in advance of the by-elections, which he lost. Also last week in Tory heartlands, and the idea was that there could not be a challenge to him, because the rules are such that once you have a no confidence motion, you cannot again lose a majority or have to prove majority for a year. So he thought he was banking a majority now for a year by bringing the no confidence motion. But now that the top bench has resigned, and I dare say there'll be other resignations, I think his days in 10 Downing Street look entirely numbered.
I'll ask you to stay on with us. Radhika is also with us, getting us more details. Radhika, I understand that Sajid Javid has said that he's already spoken to the Prime Minister on this issue and that his conscience doesn't allow him to continue. What is he alluding to over here? Anything specific?
Well, if you look at some of the decisions that were made during 2020, 2021, even as early as 2022, there were certain decisions that were made which Rishi Sunak, in fact, in his letter says that we went ahead with it, although internally we didn't agree. Rishi Sunak is often credited with two schemes that he had brought out during the pandemic, which had supported a large section of people. One was the furlough scheme, where he reached out to a lot of people who were at the threat of losing their jobs because of the pandemic, and offered a furlough where they were receiving pay. And the second being the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, when the eating industry, the food industry, the restaurant industry was doing pretty badly during the pandemic years. And often a lot of economists have credited him to spearhead those two schemes, which had helped a lot of people. And albeit it had also led to a lot of people misusing or taking advantage of those schemes as well. Clearly, UK was pushed into a lot of debt. As it is globally, there is a rising costs issue. In fact, here in the UK, it is even more apparent than it is in some other countries, perhaps such as India, where people are having to choose. A lot of the lower rung working class people are having to choose between either heating in the house or a meal on the table. Given this severity of the crisis and the economic crisis that is multiplying, the political crisis itself within the Tory, Rishi Sunak as well as Sajid Javid both have indicated that their conscience is not able to sort of justify their further existence or continuing in the roles or to work alongside Boris Johnson as their leader, albeit it's very clear that both of them supported Boris Johnson during the no confidence motion. So now with this development, with the top bench resigning, it is evident that the key ministers in Boris's government he had always banked on have now given up on Boris Johnson and are not supporting him, have resigned from their jobs, which means there are two problems, one of governance and the other, of course, of his existence as Prime Minister for Boris Johnson itself. And the second is whether this will now lead to further resignations from other peers, other ministers within the government.
Shruti Kapila, help us understand what next. Can a person replace Boris Johnson if his position becomes untenable, as we've been talking, or fresh elections will be called? What is it going to be like?
Yes, well, as I was alluding, there is actually a problem because Boris Johnson did call in a no confidence motion ahead of what was going to be a set defeat in the Tory heartlands for him 2 weeks ago. Now, which means that the law is such, the party law is such that a new no confidence motion cannot go ahead. It means that he technically enjoys the majority of his ministers and the government for a year. But I think we will probably see a lot of backroom work in the Tory whip's office, in the party, because let's not forget, actually the party president, the leader of the party also resigned as soon as the sexual misconduct scandal broke 48 hours ago. So at this point, actually, the Tories don't have a kind of working president either. And you have a law, a local rule within the party, which disallows another no confidence motion in the Prime Minister. So in the first instance, I think either the Tories are probably banking on Johnson resigning himself, and I would imagine that at some point there will be a fresh election announced, because I think there is also a fair amount. We haven't really talked about the Labour and the Liberal Democrats, but your viewers might want to know that the Tories have been now in power for 15 years, and COVID or no COVID, there's a huge amount of not just anti-incumbency, but a huge amount of restiveness in the British electorate. And you see the Liberals and the Labour Party both galvanized, but also possibly in talks of a coalition to form a front against the Tories. So I think these are interesting times.
Yes.
But also we are going into a summer recess here, so things will have to move quickly before, as it were, Parliament breaks for the summer break.
Shruti Kapila, I want you to comment on the larger picture as well. This is a difficult time for Europe. There's a war going on in Ukraine. Can political instability mean further troubles for the common man in the UK?
Well, the world is in crisis, whether it's in India, whether it is America, or whether it is Britain. The world is in crisis, particularly the global economy post-COVID, high inflation as well. I think this will propel, as I said, this is what is also propelling these ministers to resign and force Boris Johnson's hand, because you need a stronger hand of government at the moment than he's able to give at the moment. But this is also what we saw actually last week when the Tories were battling for their seats in some of the heartlands. Johnson was seen to be absconding, or rather not quite absconding, but he was in Rwanda and Kigali, ostensibly for a Commonwealth summit. So he seemed to be missing in action, and this is now kind of push has come to shove. And I think the ministers now are fearing for their own power. Local MPs are fearing for their own ability to win election. And I think we will see a change. We will see, I mean, I can't predict the future, but even if there is a stopgap leadership bid and there's a stopgap leader in place, we will see an earlier election coming to Britain. And it will be interesting to see what the Labour Party does and the Liberals do, who seem to be very much on the ascendant.
Right. Shruti Kapila and Radhika Iyer, both of you, many thanks for joining us.